Hey everyone, how you doing? It's been a while. I wanted to come back in a big way. I had actually planned to release a pretty large video last year. Might have been over 6 hours long, going over everything I did last year. This includes reading through Berserk for the first time, to playing through Devil May Cry franchise and so on. Which I'm now hooked on, by the way. I made an entire script for each entry, just had to record the lines and move around in front of a camera every now and then, depending on how excited I got about each entry. This ultimately fell flat as I didn't finish recording or even start the editing. I even still have the Audacity file for the audio since I don't have access to a boom mic, and I was using a camera to record. I was going to green screen myself out with AI and everything. It was going to be my biggest video yet. I doubt even if I had put in all that work, nobody would have watched it anyway, so it's not a big deal. My goal to do 365 things in a year, as well as the video, ended up in failure. So for this year, I want to do something similar but keep things pretty chill by going over some of the highlights as well as some honorable mentions. Going to try to spend at most a minute between each entry so that the video doesn't get too long. Got a little something to announce at the very end too. So, without further ado, let's begin. Spoilers for everything I'm going to talk about, by the way. I should have a chapter section in the bottom so you can skip around to parts of the video if you don't want to get spoiled on certain things. We'll start with an old friend of mine, you could say. I had plans to have gameplay videos of this game on the channel, but eventually had to delete them when I needed to clear up space. It's a game I've played on and off for the past 4 years now, and it's honestly become one of my favorite games of all time, from its amazing stories and how it fleshes out the characters. It takes side stories from the light novels and gives them voice acting from the official Japanese voice actors from the show. It's also incredibly free-to-play friendly, and you can tell there's a lot of love and passion put into the quality of the game. Some of the events that were released this year started with Return of the Hero, which covered the finale of Season 3 of the anime, brought the Festa units, which are some of the most powerful units in the game, being Bell and Asterius. Also, getting the best special move animations in the game as well. Artaro and Alan eventually came along and got some units as well. These units are also the only ones in the game whose unit art becomes animated if you max limit break their units, so that's pretty cool. There was Valhalla Panic, which revolves around Freya getting bored and her familia doing charity work. This event brought back the goddess Aphrodite, and it was also pretty funny to see one of the few rare moments that these always super serious characters get a little goofy. There was A Twilight Dream, which is about a woman by the name of Althea, previously a member of the Heya Familia, as well as a level 7 villain in the 3rd anniversary for the game. The first anniversary I played, in fact. It also became the best story I've ever read, so there's that. The event entails an alternative timeline in which Belle's grandmother, and yes, this is canon, never left to side with Erebus and instead raised Belle. It was a pretty short event, but also gave us my personal favorite loading screen in the game, as well as a calmer edition of Lumiere that we had heard for the Season 4 tie-in units that we got last year.
渦を巻く雨雲から差し込んだまっすぐな強い光
There was Dungeon Memorial Sing for My Werewolf, which was this year's April Fool's event, which turned the game into a visual novel romance game. That came with a lot of why I love this game so much, is just how out of pocket it allows itself to be at times. Stuff that would seem out of place in Star Wars or say Berserk is able to find a home with Danmachi. And I just love how far they're willing to push things at times just to make some playful jabs at things. There was Knossus War, which continued adapting the Danmachi Sword of Toria light novels with voice acting. This event included Loki Familia's clash with Evilis, and even the deaths of some characters such as
すまない、ロキ。
Oh shit. This would all lead up to the 6th anniversary taking place. Part 1 of the 4th season of Danmachi left off on a huge cliffhanger with Belle and Ryu being dropped to the deep floors, while the rest of the party were left to face a floor boss on their own. They are screwed. Danmachi went from cave exploring to survival horror as the show seriously took a tone shift, and weirdly enough also led to one of the best natural progressions for following for someone that I haven't seen done in anime for a while. I gotta say, I was rooting for Belle to get with eyes, low-key someone else too, but now I'm really thinking about switching sides about who would be best for him. Taking place after the events of Season 4, Belle is dragged right out of the hospital and into a fight with the cult Evilis, as this is the adaptation of Volume 12 of the Sword Oratoria light novel. Loki Familia pits himself against the leader of Evilis named Enyo, whom is finally unmasked to be
Dionysus! 茶番は終わりや。
お見事、ロキ。
What? And the masked creature is, huh? How? What? An epic battle ensues, giving us some of that animated cutscene magic that has been so rare in the game, ranging from eyes kicking some ass
倒す。
to Belle killing Nidhogg. Oh, my boy's really grown up, y'all. We see the deaths of Revis, Enyo, and Philvis, and the rebirth of a new Lafia. Grand Day was released as it was the first anniversary event. It was the only one I had never played as they had released Argonaut a few times, but never Grand Day. It was alright, not much to say on it. There are a few Danmachi event videos I watched on YouTube, ranging from the Attack on Titan crossover event to the Christmas Miracle, which features a ghost girl by the name of Noelle and Vito. Seriously, this dude is no joke. Like, I watched the trailer for the event and then this happened.
年がいもなくはしゃいでしまいそうです。
Christ. Vito appeared as well during the 3rd anniversary as well as the 6th, as he's part of Evilis, which brings us to the last event that Danmachi Memoria Freese is going to have. Ever. That's right. The last anniversary event was the last one the game is going to have. The team behind the game sent out a message stating how quality over quantity was always their mission, bringing us voice-acted content for events. But when they realized they couldn't bring us that same quality anymore, they were unfortunately not left with many options. They had adapted just about everything into this voice-acted visual novel form, so they announced that the 6th anniversary would be the last one with this small story following it. This story, titled appropriately after the game, tells what happened to Vito after the 6th anniversary. Noelle returns for the first time, and through her, Vito is a change of heart and vows to change his ways. Kind of an odd note to leave the game off on as a very final word, but the game's going to end all the same, so it's nice to have as much as we can to remember it by. Dawn Crow came up, but man, honestly, it's just not the same. Not sure if I'm going to play it as much as they did, but they did release Otaro recently, so I may try it out again. It's crazy how a character I used to hate has ended up being one of my favorites, as he shares similarities to an NPC I'm slowly crafting for my D&D campaign. The Battle for Elvira was a mini D&D campaign I ran as a way to get back into the swing of DMing a full year after my first campaign had ended. This event entailed that random riots started happening around the world where adventurers would begin slaughtering only elves and Amazons. This led to a strike team to be sent out to Elvira to help the Elven Queen who had sent out a distress message. The strike team, comprised of the players as well as some knights, commanders, and a dragon, were shot down. The players were left stranded and forced to progress and fight their way through Elvira, trying to figure out what was wrong. It ended with a boss fight with a lich and an Elven Queen that I honestly could have written better without sounding completely like an elitist asshole, but that's for another day.
Man, what a fucking terrible queen.
Then there came a one-shot about people going missing in a local town. The players are part of an in-world faction called the Paladin's Order who serve Talos. After getting some information, they set a trap and finally encountered the entity responsible. The Skull Stalker picks up the wolf intruding on its den. It puts the wolf between its teeth and bites down. Its teeth begin to spin rapidly as the wolf's body is reduced to blood and meat chunks, which proceed to spill out from the Skull Stalker's ribcage onto the floor beneath. With insane, blinding speed, regenerative abilities, and a tough body, it put up a difficult fight, almost killing one of the party members. But in the end, it finally fell. Everyone was able to get a happy ending as the one-shot ended. I got some of my D&D group together and we watched D&D Honor Among Thieves. We all enjoyed it. I mean, it wasn't mind-blowing, but at the same time, it just seemed like your average D&D campaign in movie form, so it was pretty good. I especially loved the Speak with Dead scene.
Once the dead man is revived, we can ask him 5 questions, at which point he will die again, never to be re-revived.
Were you killed in the Battle of the Everhorse?
Yes.
4 more questions, right?
Yes.
No, that wasn't for you. Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it. Only answer when I talk to you, okay?
Yes.
Why did you say okay at the end of that?
I didn't.
Fantastic. Where's the shovel?
Excuse me. I'm still alive.
Right. What's your favorite book?
Hard to pick just one.
5th question, right?
Yep.
In terms of historical works, I'd say The Fanged Tome of Lycanthus Tsar. That was only the 4th question. Hello? Oh, shit.
Oops, good shot.
Let's go!
Just like enemy. Wow.
As per my ways of wanting to tie up loose ends, I wanted to have a mini epilogue campaign for my first campaign, the Immortal Continent, to tell what happened to the world right after the players met God. What went down was a battle against 50 airships, yes, 50. They traversed through the Dark Castle they never went to during the campaign, fought some humans in Pokemon suits, participated in a dance battle.
I just continue to do flips on the floor, the dance floor.
You're gonna do what again? And fought the remnants of the cult. All to face a corrupted player character that I had played in my friend's Pokemon D&D campaign. That's right, all the Pokemon my friends had fought along the way were my team throughout that campaign, just humanized. The final boss was Darkrai, and the day was saved. For now. Now we've started running a mini-campaign about how the world began, and I'm hoping everything I've set up will go well. Pokemon Masters seems to be going well, as it's really come far from how bland it used to be. There's a lot more variety and challenge, as well as new units to experiment with. While it's still not the most free-to-play friendly game, I have to commend it that it feels rewarding to succeed. The stories, though, haven't gotten that much better, though. I played through a lot of the trainer stories, but I don't even remember what they were about. Something I really enjoyed, though, was the Paulo interlude in the final chapter. It was really cool to see us get our first rival trainer who joined an evil team, rather he lead it. I mean, finally, it was great to see an evil team get serious and start whipping out legendaries instead of universally using Zubats. There are a few more events that I've played, but honestly, I haven't touched the game in months and I know I've missed a lot. Here's hoping I can go back and catch up with the current meta. I played the first Dead Space for the first time. Young me swore to myself that I'd never play it because it was too scary. But here I was, and I gotta admit, the game was scary for the first 5 minutes, and then never again after that. For as many jump scares there are in the game, none of them really got me. What? Played Dead Space 2 after that, and it was much better. Not really scary until we returned to the Ishimura, but I really loved the final push to the marker with that invincible thing chasing you, as well as the fake ending and the callback to the first game.
What?
Hey, yeah! I love that. I love that they did that. I love that they did that. I was hoping they would. A little contrast to the first game. Woo! I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that ending bit. I haven't played the third one yet because I heard it's bad, but maybe someday. The reason I finally played the classic Dead Space games was due to knowing that the new Dead Space remake was coming out, and honestly, I really loved it. Giving Isaac a voice really put a new perspective on things. There were some things that I felt the original did better, such as the amount of necromorphs they throw at you, but other than that, it was a near perfect remake in my eyes. Move! Ah, idiot. Oh, did you get the broom closet ending? The broom closet ending is my favorite. And the loading times blew me away! Next to no loading screens, and you could be in-game playing within a minute of launching the EXE, which I haven't seen any other games of this scale do before. Watched through Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and I had a bit of a similar moment that I did with A Silent Voice. With A Silent Voice, I'd watched it originally with like 2 other dudes on a Gmod Cinema server, and after the movie ended I thought it was alright. After watching it again years later, I came to realize just how beautiful a piece of art it was. I watched through Edgerunners, and when it ended, I thought it was alright. It wasn't until months later where I really wanted to stay, Your House was stuck in my head, and I thought back on the show that I began to fall in love with it. I loved the characters and the tragedy that eventually befell David and his gang. When I started playing through Cyberpunk 2077, no matter what happened, I had one goal in mind. Kill Adam Smasher and avenge my boy David Martinez. So, with David's jacket on my back and Rebecca's shotgun unfound, I cleaned up Night City by slaughtering thousands and became a name to be feared by gangs all around, just so I could march up to Arasaka Tower and beat Adam Smasher to death. Like I said, this one's for David.
How about that, Johnny?
Didn't care what ending I got. Revenge was all that mattered. But as it turned out, the revenge was the adventure I had along the way as I fell in love with this game. It happened while hearing that song again playing in one of the random buildings while I was standing in the rain. It's become my new sci-fi itch that Star Wars just can't scratch anymore. Now I just gotta play the DLC.
You must complete a series of tests. Please do not hinder or delay.
Why are you blue?
Now, this was a show I've been wanting to watch for years, but never got around to it. I started the first episode last year, but didn't finish the first season until this year. I thought the show was about Walter getting cancer and trying to cook up a cure using meth. Well, I can gladly say it's based more in reality than that. I've seen several Breaking Bad YouTube poops, so it was nice to see the original scenes play out. And boy, I came back to a serious show with stressful and tough character decisions as well as some comedy well placed in.
Get off the toilet! Get off the toilet!
Oh man, Season 2 really popped off. Each episode starting off with these black and white scenes alluding to something that has to have happened by the season finale. We even get a shot of 2 bodies being covered up that we could assume are Walter and Jesse. Me knowing they survived past this point, knew there was nothing to fear, but I can imagine the anticipation of those who didn't know there were going to be more seasons past this one as the show was airing. We had some stressful scenes with Walt, Jesse, and Tuco, and the death of Tuco. Skylar adds the word yo to her vocabulary.
My name is Skylar White, yo. My husband is Walter White, yo.
We meet Saul Goodman and Gus Fring. We meet Mike, whom was my favorite character in the show, as well as Jane, whom Walt watches die, causing a plane crash and the death of 200 people with all that blood on Walt's hands. In Season 3, we get the family roof pizza scene. Skylar became my least favorite character.
I fucked Ted.
I learned what the word Tortuga means. Hank takes on 2 hitmen and receives injuries that he doesn't recover from for most of the rest of the show. Walter gets his own meth lab but likes Jesse better than the new guy, so he has him executed by Jesse. Jesus. In Season 4, we get the "I am the danger" line. Hank almost busts Walt, which had me reeling back in shock at how cocky Walt has gotten.
WW. I mean, who you figure that is, huh? Woodrow Wilson? Willy Wonka? Walter White?
You got me.
Kid named Finger and Jesse spend some quality time together. Mike and Gus show how badass they are. We get the famous Gus death scene Two-Face origin story. And Walt poisons the child. Jesus. We start the final season with this guy named Todd shooting a kid. Walt has a guy say his name.
Heisenberg. You're God.
I cheered. We get the famous Walter scene.
Sorry, Mike. Walter. Shut the fuck up.
We get this insane Death Note type scene where Walter gets a bunch of dudes killed in prison at the exact same time. Hank takes a shit and finally figures it out. Yes, really. Holy shit. Which I really like how Hank goes no mercy on Walt and pretty much hates him for the rest of the season. Walt keeps getting away with this. We get a very famous scene that involves Hank's death, but I couldn't take it seriously because of this man! I could not stop thinking about his Breaking Wind YouTube poop during this and about how I was going to go rewatch it after I finished the show.
That fancy phone of yours, where does it say?
Walt returns with a beard sometime later on, and he's packing some heat.
Don't move. Don't dare move a muscle. You don't want them to think that you're trying to get away. Just breathe.
This only turns out to be Jesse's friends with some laser pointers, which I really liked. We get a really good scene where Walt finally admits to Skylar that everything he did was for himself.
Understand.
I have to hear one more time that you did this for the family.
I did it for me. I liked it.
Walt kills everyone, including himself, and the series ends there. Man, this show really was a ride. One of the best I've ever watched, hands down. Not sure if it's my favorite TV show compared to Utopia, but it's damn near close. Watched Puss in Boots: The Last Wish with some friends, and I really loved it. Loved Jack Horner and Death as villains, and it was just a great movie all around. I even had a dream where I was Jack Horner and I was just wrecking stuff that very night. It was great. I began back listening to some Star Wars audiobooks from Audible in chronological order containing where I had left off from the Old Republic era. I had listened to the first 2 Darth Bane books back in my high school days, and they included a few concepts that were so thoughtful that I use some of them, such as the Rule of 2, as life advice to this day. I finally listened to the 3rd installment in the series 7 years later, and I was hooked on every word, and left with an incredible ending that left me wanting answers, but in a good way. I listened to other audiobooks in chronological order leading up to past The Phantom Menace. I don't remember most of them honestly, aside from the Darth Maul books. Those are really good, especially Maul Lockdown. That book has so many twists and turns, and with the limits that Maul couldn't use his force abilities for the whole book, left with some interesting scenarios for Maul to overcome. I watched through Star Wars Visions Season 2 and I really enjoyed it. The majority of the season seemed to have a large focus on both the dark side and the Empire. My favorite episode was the one called In the Stars, which is about these two tribal girls who avenge their mother by taking down an Imperial factory in the area. One of the reasons I like this episode was because it's not like, oh, here's another Jedi that survived Order 66, but instead it's two tribal people that I can believe completely dodged the extinction of Force sensitives because they weren't at the center of it in the first place. Here we arrive at my favorite experience of the year. This game is what I believe a great sequel should be. A game that improves and expands on both the story as well as the gameplay. I loved the darker direction the game took at times, as well as seeing how Cal has grown as a person. By the end of the game, I had him looking as close to what I imagined a modern day Kyle Katarn would look like. Kyle is finally hooking up with Merrin, Darth Vader finally gets a health bar, and we see Kyle embrace the dark side a few times. This game has as well done something that no other game before it has done before, and that was make me cry. It was right at the end where a lot of what Cal said as a send-off to Seer reminded me a lot of myself.
But I'm scared. I almost lost myself. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready for what comes next.
It's a shame that the game launched in such a buggy state as well as not win any Game Awards this year. I was thankfully able to get through it mostly unscathed as this became my personal game of the year. Wish it could have gotten a better reception, but for now we'll just have to wait and see what's in store for the next game. Not going to speak on Ahsoka here, it's garbage. I refuse to watch the finale. Watched Kill Bill for the first time with some friends. Got a bit of a childhood history with this one. There was this Kill Bill inspired Star Wars animation from the earliest days of YouTube and I loved it to death. I remember always wondering why Luke suddenly killed Ben, and had always wanted to see stormtroopers carrying lightsabers since. Back to the movie though, I really enjoyed the over-the-top fighting and story and I want to watch the sequel at some point. This one's the classic Guilty Gear. Really old, Beyblade, DS style type game with branching stories and alternate endings. Other soul fight slaps as well. Oh my god, I could do without the freaking ultra combo. I can do without the freaking ultra combo, man! Give me a break here. Guilty Gear went in a weird direction with Overture, a fighting game turned third-person RTS. Definitely an interesting direction. Final boss fight went hard. Gonna put both the XRD games into a combination on this one. I genuinely loved the anime art style. They've seriously perfected making it look like you're playing an actual anime better than I've seen any other game do. Even slowing down the frame rate of characters so it looks even more authentic. Remlethal's character development also goes hard.
白黒はっきりしてなくたっていいんだよ。だからラムも自分がこうじゃなきゃいけないなんて決めつけなくたっていいんだ。
でもそれでは私は道具にはなれない。
違うよ。ラムは道具なんかじゃない。
違う?
Being the current last game in the franchise, while I honestly like the combat of XRD more, I gotta hand the best story out of all of them over to Strive. Happy Chaos absolutely stole the show and delivered us some Hollywood-level cinema.
それが名前だけど、それ以外の何でもない。君が見たまま感じたままのそれでいい。ただね、卵が先か鶏が先かって話があるでしょ。君はあれの答え知ってる？え？オムレツ。答えはオムレツだ。オムレツがあるから卵も鶏も存在できる。僕は本当に何でもいいし、何でもない。でも存在している。
Only wish that more of the Guilty Gear characters had gotten involved, just to see what's up with them and how they're doing. Just watching Chainsaw Man Season 1, and got to say, congrats to Mappa as always. Really enjoyed finally being able to see the Katana Man fight animated. Part 2 of Chainsaw Man has kicked off with us getting a new girl as the possible main character or villain, but it remains to be seen. Volume 13 dropped recently, so I still have to read it and see how it goes. Played Red Dead Redemption 2 for the first time, and it had been a rocky road at the start, but I did come around to enjoying the game. Not sure if I'd put it in my top 10, but still need to play Red Dead 1, so here's looking forward to that. Guys? Yo, can we chill? Yeah. Fellas, please. Fellas. Fellas.
My dear Arthur, I have gone out hunting. Not a phrase I thought any pen of mine would ever ink, but nonetheless one I am very proud to finally be able to write. I am so very grateful to you for all the help and encouragement.
Guys, you're ruining the moment.
There is some money in a box on the nightstand.
Got like a shotgun
Please take
too.
it. I have far more than I need back in the city, and I'd like you to have it. Please take care, and remain true to the man I know you are.
Last chance before I kill your ass! Hands up!
This next one probably would have been my favorite thing I'd done this year if it had not been for Breaking Bad and Jedi Survivor. I'm talking about my house.wad. It was my first Doom WAD as well as my first time playing Doom 2. It was a short map, yes, but it really gets you nostalgic for those old days of playing Doom mapping. Oh, music stopped. This is different. Oh, it's one of these hallways, huh? But, like many other great plot twists, there was a secret that's been there the whole time, you just didn't notice it. Hadn't even scraped the surface with this iceberg. Exploring all I could find on my own. Whoa! What is that thing? Following Let's Plays to help me along gave me one of my favorite gaming experiences of all time. I mean, this was absolutely incredible, the amount of stuff this WAD includes. Yeah, like I said, point made. And now the full thing is bloody! I mean, you got the secret Backrooms level, Shrek, the way that the map changes without any loading screens at all, the way it breaks conventional mapping standards. I never went for the true ending, but after playing all I could, I went and watched a few hour-long videos that had led me to find out about the WAD in the first place, and man, it just made me love the WAD even more.
Happiness has to be fought for.
I played through Iron Lung and didn't really find it all that scary. Oh! Huh. Played through Scroll Stapler and thought the same thing, but honestly, I like Scroll Stapler more. Whoa, hey! I won! Hey, cool. I really like the idea of how it's set up to be this random game that you might find in a bargain bin. You got this photoshopped squirrel and looping music in the beginning. I'm imagining some unknowing person randomly picking up this game from a bargain bin as like a CD-ROM or something, and then coming to find that the contents of this game are this. Give me back my skin, or give me yours instead. No. In Sound Mind was another great time I had this year. I mean, this game features the best therapist ever. I mean, this guy picks up a gun and is willing to take on eldritch horrors in order to finally put his patients that he had failed to rest. The soundtrack is also by the Living Tombstone, so there's also another level of quality put into the game as well. Oh shoot, that's the Fnaf thing. Oh, it's been so long. All around, the game was really fun, and I had a blast playing it. Yeah! I finally got to finish the forest with a couple of friends. I felt the payoff of spending so much time with my friends in the forest was a lot better than finding my son, so I made a moral choice and chose not to condemn a bunch of innocents to death. Not a hard choice. However, the sequel must go on. Fears to Fathom gets a very small spotlight here, as it had atmosphere that went hard out of nowhere. Why so ominous? What's with the ghosts like breathing down my neck here? I played Stay Out of the House, which was my first Puppet Combo game. Been scared to try out their game since watching Power Drill Massacre gameplays.
Just fucking run. Okay, go this way. Oh my!
Since you can only currently get those games on their Patreon, I took the next best thing and played their 3 games on Steam. Stay Out of the House has been their most recently released one and definitely has the most polish. Sooth plays like Granny. You're locked in a killer's house and have to escape while going all over the house to collect different items to get the key to escape while avoiding said killer, and you only have a certain number of days to escape until you're killed. I really enjoyed this one as its atmosphere of no music and just the distant sounds of the sermon and TV static. Got some funny glitches along the way too. Played Murder House as well. I really liked that one, and while I definitely called the twist, I really liked how it all turned out to be a movie at the end. Or did it? Not really wanting to talk about Christmas Massacre too much. Was the first thing I did in December, and yeah, that just made me feel bad, which I believe was the intention. I finally decided to continue playing the Amnesia series. Starting with the official sequel, Rebirth, I really didn't find it all that good or scary, but the game did have some genuinely good spots at times. How many of them are there? Oh, there's a lot more than I had thought. Okay. Amnesia the Bunker was where things really kicked off, though. I loved this all the way through. Another granny type situation, but instead you got a monster lurking about who will snap your neck if it gets too close. Love the mechanic of having to charge your light source, but having to be careful not to make too much noise. At the beginning I had no idea what I was dealing with, as the expert sound design made the creature sound closer than it actually was. Loved the mechanic of telling where your health was by looking at how bloody your hand was. I also loved how you don't directly see the monster most of the time. I crafted one of these torches thinking that this line meant that I could keep the monster at bay. Well, I finally got a good look at it, and well... level of stress is also added when you're told you can only save via this lantern in this room. So if you die and haven't saved in a while, you know you'll lose a lot of progress, so it makes you be extra careful. Another mechanic I liked was the generator and having to keep the lights on. The fucker hates light, so you have to get as much fuel as you can to keep the lights on. Doesn't keep it from coming after you, but definitely deters it from just free roaming in the dark. I really can't wait to see what they have next in store for the Amnesia franchise. Can I be honest? I gotta be honest once again when I say that I don't understand why, when I see all these polls about what the best remake this year was, people always gravitate towards this one. I mean, yes, the graphics look amazing, phenomenal. Pairing a chainsaw with a knife is goddamn badass. But other than that, Dead Space, like I said before, is what I believe a remake should be, adding stuff to the pre-existing game. But Resident Evil 4, the remake, takes so much away from the original game. For context, I finished it last year, so I had it fresh in my mind for this release. This remake removes so much from the original, though some things I'm glad it removed, but also removed a lot of the charm as well. Gone are the conversations with Sadler, and you meet him near the ass end of the game in this one. Also gone are all the references to Americans.
Like you, I'm American.
And they kept Roman's dialogue, but they crammed it all together during this boss fight, which was an improvement over. But I guess I got to say, despite my disappointment, it does do the job of being a proper remake.
Are you ready for me? Yeah, let's settle this.
Yeah, let's settle this, Krauser. Emesis Blue was a goddamn experience. You got the Hall of the Mountain King scene. You got the Pyro's face reveal scene. You got the coffin scene where it's setting up that soldier's about to pull up that grenade pin, but then... There's so much foreshadowing in this movie. Cinematography is amazing. I mean, going back to that coffin scene, the way the camera pans as Medic is walking down the aisle looking completely devoid, accompanied by that music, is just something I really love. Speaking of that, all the models look really good as well, and after the movie you're just left with more questions that you want answers to, which is intentional as the movie was made to make you ask questions. If you haven't seen this film yet, you're missing out on a great horror experience. Might and Magic Clash of Heroes got a definitive edition, which I wasn't expecting. Had this game since my childhood Xbox 360 days. I never beat the story, but I remember that fucking moving elf guy level. Please don't move. See, I told you, he walks right in front of you. And there he goes, we lost. Great. Love this level. But I finally went and beat it, and I quite enjoyed it. Even ended up struggling against the final boss, Lord Bloodcrown, a few times too. I see. I watched through the 1997 Berserk adaptation with my friend Mason, and though I didn't at first, I came to like the direction they took this adaptation by limiting as many monster encounters as there were in Berserk, such as skipping the entirety of the Riald arc up until the Eclipse where they went full out, ending the series on a dark cliffhanger which I couldn't believe they did. Imagine all those people who think the series just ended there. I went back to reading Berserk again. In Volume 29 they meet Blackbeard, but not really, and also Aizen is back. The volume ends with Serpico challenging Guts to a fight to the death, something I've been wanting to see for a while. In Volume 30, the fight between Guts and Serpico goes as well for a Serpico fighting Guts as you expect, and I swear, every time we get an establishing shot of Guts, I hear that little guitar riff from One Punch Man. Griffith ends up being mistaken for God. For fuck's sake, he's too powerful! In Volume 31, Guts gives himself over to the Berserker armor and starts going to town and shredding these fools! Guts gets into a fight with this freaking wizard, which is cool, and Guts becomes Batman for a second, and after a super tough fight in which his wizard named Diva has become one of the few people in Berserk to survive a direct encounter with Berserker Guts, Kanishka comes and ruins it! Can they catch a break? And here I think, oh, Diva is going to be cast aside and killed. But no! This dude is so strong, he takes multiple lightning strikes from Kanishka like his comic relief! We also get another round of how is Guts not dead here. And now Zod shows up, backed up by apostles, but it seems like in a rare scene Zod can't get the job done in. Poor Guts, man. We start off Volume 32 with Zod and Guts running on Kolan to tear a hole straight through Kanishka. The Midland army of Being Mid is being swamped by the Kushan, only for Griffith to swoop in and one-tap them. Even getting this badass scene where Kanishka, this Emperor of Death, begins trembling at the sight of Griffith. Kanishka tries to fight back, but gets beaten by some air and ends up kneeling to Griffith instead. Kanishka runs away, and Griffith gains more clout. In Berserk Volume 33, we see the return of Blackbeard, as well as him getting bodied, and Kanishka transforms into God. In Volume 34, all of Griffith's demons come to fight alongside mankind against God. Also, I gotta say, I really love the design of the Hunter's Apostle form and how he uses his horns as the Nook for his arrows. Or is it Nook or Nock? Which is it? I still find it pretty crazy how Griffith is doing the impossible in uniting both apostles and mankind. And then Griffith one-taps God. And then my boy Skull Knight comes in swinging, and then he uses Skull Knight to one-tap God and gain more clout! And now the door is open and Fantasia arrives, as well as a foe in which Dragon Slayer can finally prove its name true. In Volume 35, they summon the tree from Attack on Titan, Blackbeard returns and gets bodied again. We meet this girl who definitely isn't special in any way, and we continue the trend of the cast not getting a break. And Guts puts on the Berserker armor! In Berserk Volume 36 we see... gross. Wow, that girl sure is special! The rest of this volume is literally just Guts fighting stuff. I'm going to say it again, man can't catch a break. In Volume 37, there is a rare good parent in this manga. Guts almost gets killed by a heartbeat. Guts' child shows up again, and the mermaids help guide the ship, but I can't help but keep thinking what would happen if they accidentally ran over one of the mermaids with the ship. We see more of Guts' past and meet Sitch.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
We in the volume meeting back up with Rickard again as he arrives at the city of Falconia. In Volume 38, we get a look at the epic city that is Falconia. We see Griffith's influence as he's only just uniting the Kushan and Midland people together. Seriously, how is Guts going to beat this guy? Best character in Berserk is back, and we see Rickard deliver the slap of the millennium, and has now officially dealt more damage to Griffith than Guts has! Locus, who I thought was cool, proceeds to send for Griffith and tries to have Rickard killed, only for him to hire some of the toughest characters in Berserk to his party, most of them of which have survived direct encounters with Guts. The other party finally arrives at Alfheim, and the volume ends there. Only thing that really happens in this volume is that the group finally gets some well-deserved rest, and Shrike and Farnese begin on reconstructing the shattered personality of Casca. And that's all I've read for Berserk this year. Here's to finally finishing the series in 2024. Land of the Lustrous Volume 12 dropped this year, and I was hyped to read it, only to get a really heartbreaking ending. Over the course of this manga, Foss has been the driving factor in wanting peace between the two factions. No matter how messed up she got, that was her goal at the end of things. Only for her to be left behind and abandoned on Earth for 10,000 years. And every single Lunarian, including the gems, without a single one of them ever breaking from this, is like, yeah, okay, she can suffer. The passage of time in this manga has always seemed minuscule to everyone in the story. After 10,000 years pass, we finally see what became of Foss in all of that time. Her form completely changed, and all of the Lunarians came with their heads bowed to her. They said that it would only take 10,000 years for Kongo's powers to transfer to Foss. But from what Foss says here, we can assume that the Lunarians had the audacity to not just wait 10,000 years, but to just say, man, we'll wait a few more before going down there. It was at this point that I came to hate every other character besides Foss. But Foss finally gives them their wish instead of taking revenge. This story has a bad ending in that Foss had to suffer 10,000 and some years in solitude before she could finally have her ending. But a good ending as she can finally free herself of her torment. This ending takes 10,000 years to arrive, but only lasts 14 pages. After this ending, I closed the book and just had to sit for a while and think about life itself. It wasn't until a few days prior to me looking for images to put in this video that I stumbled across some extra chapters that were only in the special editions of this volume. These chapters show that Foss is still alone and alive after this, but maybe that's for another day. I watched Season 3 of The Boys with my boy Mason, and man, they just went a lot with this one. And yet, despite both Huey and Butcher both getting superpowers, at the end of it we end up going back to square one again! I have no idea what they have in store for Season 4, but after seeing how Season 3 ended, things are certainly looking bleak.
Yeah! Yeah!
All right.
My friend Mason wanted me to watch this anime called Heavenly Delusion. I thought it was pretty good and I'd recommend people watching it. I'm obsessed with the opening as well as the art style. I also watched Lord of the Rings for the first time. I'd never seen the actual movies, but I played the LEGO adaptations when I was younger. I've always wanted to watch them, and I fairly enjoyed the experience. After hearing about it all over the place, I decided to give the amazing digital circus a watch, and I enjoyed what I saw. The music is pretty good, and I'm curious where the series is going to go from here. I watched the Backrooms series and the oldest view by Kane Pixels, the same guy that made the Attack on Titan historical live-action footage. I watched the Backrooms series in chronological order, and I was thoroughly impressed by the production value of the series. Regarding the oldest view, while I didn't really find it scary, I've always liked the concept of buildings that were created deep into the earth. An entire mall, no less. In my short period of watching through the analog series on YouTube, I watched a lot of Fnaf VHS tapes. Not really sure why people find these scary, as so many of them are just the same thing of normal thing, glitchy audio, jump scares, ooh, so scary. Of all the series I watched, like the Mandela Catalog and several others, I never really found them scary, but Greylock has been an exception. Greylock was an exception as I found myself more being disturbed and intrigued by the story. Definitely recommend giving this series a watch.
Come on out, it's the police.
I finally made my return to Skyrim by joining the Dawnguard. Well, halfway through as I stopped around the Moth Priest mission a few years ago and never finished the DLC. Well, I finished it and was honestly underwhelmed with how the final fight went, as I heard it was a harder one than Mirag.
So that was a fucking lie.
I see why everyone loves Serana though, and it was really nice to finally return after all these years and pick up where I left off. Everything. All of my items and accomplishments have been sitting here just awaiting my return, and really it helped to immerse myself in the world once again. Dust off everything and take up my blade once again. I also went back to Metal Gear Rising after so many years. New videos on those coming soon, by the way. I played through the Jetsream Sam DLC, but not before the game forgot that I had beaten it before, so my warm-up was Jetsream Sam himself and Armstrong. Okay, for my first fight back I did, I think, pretty well. Yeah, even they didn't prepare me for the ass-whooping I received going through the DLC. But I still pulled it off! Right here. Okay. Oh, no, it's not over! It's not over! Yeah, no, it's not! Die! Yeah, that hurt, didn't it? So you gonna take my hand or not? Watched The Walking Dead Season 1 for the first time. It was nice. I really enjoyed the impressive practical effects and makeup that they had with the zombies. Here's to watching the other seasons in the future. I was in the mood to just play something before the year ended, so I played this Quake-like game called Dread Templar, and it was pretty fun. We'll get a video up on that at some point as well. And those are the highlights of things that I've done this year. There are some other things, but I didn't really feel like they needed mentioning. I didn't do nearly as many things as I did last year simply because I've been focusing more and more on creating my D&D stories. I'm thinking of becoming a writer someday, and D&D has really been my outlet for that. For that announcement I was going to make, I'd like to get back into posting videos again. I can't promise anything, but I'd like to try at least one video a week/month. I'm wanting to do longer form content. That means putting an entire playthrough into one video, or maybe even an entire series playthrough into one video. Either that, or I'd like to dip into doing video essays as well, but focus more on stuff that doesn't have any or many video essays on them. But I may still give my own thoughts on things I enjoy or dislike from time to time. With that being said, here's hoping 2024 is a better future. Happy New Year, everyone. Part 1 of the 4th season of Danmachi left off on a kludge? This led to a strike team being sent out to Elvira to help the Elven Queen who had sounded distress messages. What? Sooth plays like Granny. You're locked in a killer house. A killer house? Yeah, wrong franchise. And even with the assistance of a god, Blackgeared? After hearing about it all over the place, I decided to give the Immortal... The Immortal? What?